Hello and welcome. I'm Roger Ream, and this is the Liberty and Leadership Podcast, a conversation with TFAS alumni, supporters, faculty, and friends who are making a real impact in public policy, business, philanthropy, law, and journalism. Today on the Liberty and Leadership Podcast, I'm so very pleased to be joined by Jacek Spendel, a graduate of 2 TFAS programs and a vigorous advocate for freedom and free markets. Looking for an opportunity to deepen his understanding of the ideas of liberty, Jacek found the TFAS summer program in Prague in 2008. A year later, he was awarded a scholarship to attend our capital semester program in Washington, D.C. After his time at TFAS, Jacek returned to Poland, founded the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, which works to advance the ideas of free markets, individual liberty, limited government, and entrepreneurship by developing young leaders. Today, Jacek leads both Project Arizona, a program he founded, and Liberty International. Jacek, thanks so much for joining me today, all the way from Poland. I'm excited to hear more about the important work you are doing, the situation in Poland and Ukraine, and what you think the prospects for liberty are globally.
Hello, Roger. Hello, dear audience. It's an honor and pleasure to be guest of your important show.
Well, it's wonderful to be talking with you. The wonders of the time we're living in and modern technology, that we can do this almost as if we're sitting in the studio together, even though you're on the other side of the world, involved in important work, and I assume getting ready for the Christmas holidays with your family.
Interesting time, and I'm also glad that technology allows us to have smooth conversation and anywhere we are in the world.
Well, as I was preparing to talk with you today, Jacek, I was reminded that when donors sometimes ask about our budget and how much programs cost, I give them the numbers they want, but I very quickly say, the Prague program costs about $200,000 to do each summer, but because we produce someone like a Jacek Spendel, it's well worth the money. The return on the investment in just that one graduate has had more impact than the value of the $200,000 we spent on the program that year. And I can cite many, many others like that. Of course, Clint Bullock, who you know, who's a Supreme Court Justice in Arizona, came to our program in the U.S. in 1982 and has such an impact on the cause of liberty and free markets. And so that's why I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast today, because you embody both liberty and leadership. So if you don't mind, we'll dive in. And could you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and the time before you first found TFAS?
Well, thank you so much for such important, good words. I feel a little bit shamed, especially being put together in a team with Clint. But Clint is good friend, and we can say we are TFAS alumni, Liberty Gang from Arizona. Although I live in Poland, but we will mention Arizona a few times during this conversation. That's my favorite place in the U.S. That's my favorite place in the world, actually, where I do my educational leadership program. And coming back to TFAS years, oh yes, they meant a lot. They still do mean a lot to me. Well, you could say I was already a freedom-minded person before I joined the TFAS program in Prague, but on a very different level. The fact that you can meet outstanding faculty, people like Bruce Yandel, who was nominated for Nobel Prize in Economics in 80s. He was my, economic professor in Prague, along with Kurt Rothhoff and a number of other staff members. With Matthew Kwaziborski, who was the main manager of the TFAS program, he was such an icon. He is of leadership. And all these students, I was so thrilled and amazed. People from over 30 countries met in one place, and all really nice, smart and nice. And I never been to such a multicultural international project before. And this was a very good combination of quality education. This document, certificate, diploma we achieved from Georgetown University back then. TIFAS collaborated with Georgetown University
Right.
for the Prague program. Um, it meant a lot, and the education was super. Plus, these international contacts and new information. For example, about the U.S. Constitution, stuff I learned from Roger Pilon, the expert of Cato Institute, just outstanding. So that was huge. But the year later, when I joined capital semester, and well, I got a very very nice scholarship, I need to say. So once again, huge thanks to all the donors. I know many of them, majority of them, still donate to TIFAS. You do good thing. Thank you. I was very lucky to be there. That time it was more American students, but that was also important to learn how they live, what do they study at their own universities, and the DC experience itself is a special place, where politics happens and big business. I actually interned for Kodak Eastman before the company got into trouble. They didn't get in trouble because of me, I hope at least. Um, well, I had a great time with Steve Sicon. He was the head of the public relation department. Later, he moved to Toyota. He was good. And obviously, the faculty with fantastic, outstanding, and my favorite, personally, I am biased, economic professor Thomas Rustisi of George Mason University. Great times, and also friendships. This is also when I learned that something clicked in my head, that two things. First, that I want to be in liberty movement permanently. I mean, I want to make it my career. I want to join the passion with job. I want to support my living also through this, and it should be possible if I work hard enough. And the second thing, I was also very influenced by U.S. education. I definitely saw that the level of education in economics, government, is certainly higher than at the Polish university where I studied back then. And I decided to start a PhD program at the Jagiellonian University. And I'm not a doctor right now. So I got very, very busy by the end of this program. It made it impossible for me to. So I am ABA, all but ABD, all by dissertation. I'm sorry. Uh, Unfortunately, my academic advisor, he died. The best expert on Friedrich von Hayek philosophy and other philosophers, Miłowit Kuniński. Oh,
What
rest
was
in
his
peace.
name? What was his
Fantastic.
name?
His name was Miłowit Kuniński, a professor from Jagiellonian University. So I don't have this PhD, but I spent 5 years at the Jagiellonian University pursuing and learning tons. And this decision was also influenced heavily by TIFAS, and I do not regret it. So starting first joining a think tank in Poland, Globalization Institute, eventually starting my own organization just few years later, only 3 years later after capital semester, that PhD track, all of this, and even forming Project Arizona a number of years later, all of this is heavily influenced by TIFA's experience, both in Prague and in Washington, D.C.
You bring to mind that about the time you were born, I guess, great changes were taking place in Poland and in Central and Eastern Europe. And it was in 1991 that the Board of Trustees of the Fund for American Studies sent me, along with several trustees and the dean from Georgetown, over to Central and Eastern Europe to look about establishing what became our program in Prague. And we visited both Warsaw and Krakow. And I remember one evening we had dinner with 4 professors from Jagiellonian University. This was 1991, and I believe that the gentleman you mentioned, the Hayek scholar, was perhaps one of the professors who came with us. I know Professor Legutko was there, who's well known in many academic circles. And
Roger, so I'm pretty sure Professor Kuninsky was part of this meeting, part of this circle, as back in the 80s, he took part in many Liberty Fund discussion groups. And he was very involved in promoting philosophy of F.A. Hayek and classical liberal thought. So very, very likely. So great man and great loss that he's no more with us here on Earth.
so, just to summarize kind of where you've come, you were interested in the ideas of liberty. You found us, our program in Prague, had the opportunity to learn from people such as the esteemed Bruce Yandel and constitutional scholar Roger Pilon, and then got a scholarship from us to come to Washington, D.C. and study with the renowned Tom Ristisi, who was influential on many, many students in TFAS programs over the years, now still at George Mason. And then you returned home and went to work as an entrepreneur in the, not only, actually a little bit in the for-profit sector, I guess, but in the nonprofit sector, in the civic organization sector, by founding a number of different initiatives and leading to the creation of Project Arizona. So why don't we pick up with summarizing a little bit what the purpose of Project Arizona is, because it's been such a successful endeavor that you've undertaken there. And I've been so impressed with the interns or the fellows that you've brought through that program that I've met, some of whom have visited our office in Washington, D.C. So how does a young man from Poland, passionate about liberty, found Project Arizona?
So with Project Arizona, I think the deep roots are connected to my very good friend Glenn Kripe, who is head of Language of Liberty Institute. And, even before going to Prague, I actually happened to be at the Liberty Camp he organized in Slovakia. And Glenn happened to live in Phoenix for a number of years. So it was my dream to go there. And, right after I finished capital semester in 2009, little funds that I saved, I used to fly to Arizona. And I can say that I already fell in love, but much stronger connection, stronger bonds I made 2 years later when I decided to go for another internship, paid internship at Goldwater Institute. Me and my friend Damazi, we were the first international interns at that institution. And I love Goldwater Institute as much as I love TIFAS. I will not hide it. My two favorite organizations, other than the ones that I work for, of course. And it was also a fantastic time. It was the dream team with Darcy Olsen, Clint Bollig, Nick Dranias, just, victory after victory. It was just fun to go there every day to work for Goldwater. And I had this thought. I would love to have institution like this in Poland, but at that time we didn't have even leaders who would be well educated into in economics, in law, and so on. So I started something different before Project Arizona. I started Polish American Leadership Academy, and we had over 1,500 alumni. The academy. Right now is a little bit paused, but we did run for 10 years, at least 2 editions per year. So lots and lots of students who learned about ideas of freedom, about the rule of law, classical liberal thought in this academy. But I always remember about Arizona, that this is a great place, and it's an example of freedom, not just in the US, but also worldwide. So being very, very inspired with what Goldwater Institute accomplishes, and also having, personal interest. I love Arizona. I love to be there. I will not hide it. I was thinking, what kind of project can I offer to young people so that they can go to Arizona? I can offer something valuable for them and join, passion and what I like with what is actually productive and fill a niche on the market, educational market. And I was very inspired with TIFAS again. However, your programs are more in America. The focus is national focus. That's why they are in DC, and you have the international program. Here in Arizona, this is more about state rights, about how state can influence how state regulations and taxes they impose, and different freedoms, uh, the role that it could play in human life. So states are very, very important, and Arizona still can shine as a very, very good example. So the purpose is basically to bring young leaders for liberty, people who already do stuff for freedom. And this is small project. We have basically between 6 and 10 students, depends on the year, to bring them to Arizona so they can do internship, they can get meaningful education with ASU professors and other leaders, do some volunteering, and tons of networking with business people, think tank leaders, politicians, so they can absorb the climate of liberty and learn through the example. Arizona is one of the leading states for economic and individual freedom, not just because people, freedom loving people happen to live there. This is a result of hard work, very hard work of numerous institutions, libertarian, conservative, free market, that fight and work every day to achieve this. It's not easy, and the stakes are high. The other side also have their own agenda, and strong institutions, obviously. So this is a place where young people, and we are talking about people between 20 and 30 years old from all over the world, they can strengthen their careers through meaningful internships, but also they can learn about the place they go, about the U.S. Constitution. We have classes run by Clint Bolick, the very supreme Arizona Supreme Court justice you mentioned, alumnus of TIFAS. They can learn about free market economics from Crystal Slavinsky, also fantastic economist. I'm sure you know Crystal. Um, and this networking, if a small group of people, outstanding people, meet uh, individuals who are successful in their lives, then dots get connected quickly and effectively, and we see fantastic fruits. I'm super proud about a number of my alumni. One of them is doing things for TIFAS, Jorge Galicia from
That's
Venezuela.
right. Yeah.
Project Arizona was his first stop in the
Right.
United States after he left the madness of socialist Venezuela.
We've been sending Jorge Galicia out to college campuses as somewhat of a warning to American young people that we need to make sure we don't follow the path of Venezuela and head toward the kind of populist socialism that they're enduring right now that's plunged that country into poverty from being a very rich country in the past. And I don't think it's alarmist to suggest that we have to be careful not to follow that path, because that is a path that many, many rich countries have gone on in the past in human history. Uh, as you were talking, it seems to me that if you look at any given country at any given moment, it's either moving toward more freedom, more human flourishing, more individual liberty, or it's moving away from it. It's not a static thing that just sits there without any change. And we've seen in this country we've been slipping on the index of economic freedom from being one of the freest countries in the world. Many countries have passed us now as we've been adding to the burden of government on the American people and putting restrictions on economic activity. And you point out the importance of states and the role states play in creating a climate that is conducive to economic growth, economic liberty, and human flourishing. And I know that does take a lot of work. Like you said, I had Clint Bullock on as a guest in one of my earlier Liberty and Leadership podcasts, and he talked about fighting for the civil liberties, the economic liberties of people in Arizona, from the guy who owns the tattoo parlor and is trying to be closed
Mm-hmm.
down. And Clint, I think, showed us his tattoo
Yep.
after he won
Scorpion.
that case, to cases dealing with education. And also, you reminded me in mentioning the Arizona State University faculty teaching courses for your students. James Strickland, a professor at ASU, is another TFAS alum who's involved in a center there. And I hope at some point, if you haven't, you'll meet him when you're in Arizona. But now tell me about this Liberty International, which become the leader of. I know it's been around for many years, but you're leading Liberty International
Yes,
now,
yes,
and
yes.
could you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Oh, that's a fascinating story, and this is my dream job. What I'm doing, I'm president of Liberty International since 2019, and well, the organization is quite old, similar age to TIFAS actually, but much smaller. Liberty International was started in 1969, but under different names: Society for Individual Liberty. There were a number of mergers. The biggest one with Libertarian International, and they formed in late 80s organization named ISIL. Probably still many people remember us about as ISIL, International Society for Individual Liberty. And only about a decade ago, we rebranded for Liberty International.
Yeah, I think a certain terrorist organization used those initials back a few years ago, so it's a good thing you rebranded.
Yes, yes, exactly. That was the main purpose. In my very early years as already a libertarian, I went to my first ever international conference. It was ISIL, and I was awarded with scholarship in Prague in 2006, and it was a great conference. I need to say, co-organized, hosted, I should say, by Liberalny
Sure.
Institute. I'm sure you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
because
we've
that
worked
was
with
in
them.
Prague. In 2006, 2 years before TIFAS, I was in Prague for the Libertarian Conference, ISIL, as a young student, 21-year-old. And I fell in love in this movement. I met Ken Schooland first time. And later I joined 2 or 3 times as first scholar, then just participant. These world conferences, these are the flagship programs of Liberty International in Switzerland, I joined, and in Poland, and eventually 2018. So I had this friendly connection, but we were not working together. We were friends and colleagues in the freedom movement. But in 2018, or actually earlier, Ken Schooland, then president of LI, now my vice president, reached out to me saying that they are searching for reliable host and partner of the conference, and they would like to do it in Poland. And I run a Freedom Entrepreneurship Foundation. I still do run this organization with Dr. Martin Chmielowski. We decided, why not? Why shouldn't we try? This is a worthy thing. And we did it. And it was really good. Over 100 people from, I think, 25 countries gathered in Krakow. We did basically almost everything, just few guys, we were back then maybe 30-year old. And we did pretty good conference. And again, this rule that if you do something well and people see you that you are solid, this will bring positive outcomes. And just less than a year later, Ken called me saying, we are searching for new president, and I would like to meet you. And he traveled to Phoenix. He also happens to have some of the family there. And we had a conversation and started talking, and eventually I agreed for this proposition. They agreed also to have me. More importantly, obviously, the board accepted, and this big job started. I am quite busy running this organization. We have six, soon seven projects, very different projects, from Project Arizona, which I brought to Liberty International, through the World Conference, up to Libertarian Solutions, which is our online program. We started under COVID, but it's very successful. We'll have third edition of it this winter. We are working on animation project for Jonathan Gullible, the book by Ken Schooland. We are actually very soon launching our first ever research project on working migration, and we do a pilot on Ukraine with experts. We collaborate with Easy Business, Kiev-based think tank, and we will be growing this project with other countries. We are thinking about Hong Kong, Venezuela. This is about This is about situation of people who leave their countries for better life, and not necessarily refugees, but also people who basically want to move from place that doesn't offer enough opportunities to places that offer more. And we are measuring these important factors, so that this index can help as a practical tool. And practical is super important. I want to change Liberty International. I'm changing the organization so it becomes more practical libertarian organization. We libertarians are very often known as theoreticians, that we love to theorize and talk about private sidewalks or tiny, small atomic power plants or something like that. Things that are quite far from the current reality. And in in fact, today's world, very globalized world, offers a lot of freedoms and opportunities to every single human. With uh, different kinds of platforms that can help us to become more free in economic sense, to become more prosperous in ways how we can travel this right now. That's completely different world than what it was 20, 30, and more years ago. um, Also, some of the civic liberties unknown before. So we try to put the positive light on today's world, even though obviously this is an unfree world, and in many places it gets
Yeah.
worse. That's true, but to build on the positive, that's the mission. And I want to change the organization to make it more practical, and to basically so that our work can be used by people, by individuals, to make their life easier, better, and more free.
Yeah, Jacek, I've heard you reference previously a book by Harry Brown, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. So it sounds like you're taking that path of trying to show people how they can live flourishing lives and find freedom in sometimes a world that's less than free, depending on what.
This is one of the few books that influenced me the most. And I take this example as very, very important, and I believe we can do a lot in this room, helping people to live freer, more prosperous lives right now, right here in this current situation, even with governments and taxes. I don't like governments and taxes, but we shouldn't sit and cry. We should look for opportunities to flourish despite of these governments. Life offers a lot of good things. We should just grab them.
That's a great thought. Let me ask you a little bit about the situation in Poland. Putting aside just for a minute the problems created by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how is the state of freedom in Poland?
It's not in the best shape, I should say. We are a country, Poland, that did quite deep did go through deep transformation. Early 90s.
Shock therapy, right? It was called shock therapy.
Yes, shock therapy, Leszek Balcerowicz, very free market reforms were undertaken, and explosion of entrepreneurship, especially small and medium entrepreneurship. Also, lots of foreign investments. Um, that also meant, some turmoil. Lots of people lost their jobs in the big government companies that usually produce stuff that was not needed, or badly run, badly managed, because they were centrally planned, centrally managed. Very different concept than free market and the rule of supply and demand. So it was positive. Of course, there was a bumpy road, ups and downs. Some taxes were too high, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, we were on the good path. And just a few years ago, back in late 2015, this right wing party, Law and Justice, won election, and should not be nothing wrong about right wing parties to run election. Usually, these parties have more understanding of economics than the left wing parties, correct? That's generally the truth. Not in Poland. Uh, we in Poland experienced something unprecedented where the supposedly right wing party, that's how the public opinion thinks about them, is more to the left in economics than anything from center to the left. They are anti-capitalistic. They are hostile to idea of privatization, hostile to idea of um, private companies flourishing. They have this bitter mindset that some people got too successful during this transformation, and some other people did not flourish as much as they should. So they see some injustice into. So there is a lot of social justice component in this. We have a right wing party, and why they are right wing? They are right wing because they are quite conservative when it comes to their vision of nation, family, religion, and so on. But when it comes to economics, they are far left. This is a kind of a cocktail of ideas, and still a lot of people thought, I was one of them, that they rather talk about this in campaign, but they will not do this because they still have some brain. I remember when they were in power in 2005 until 2007, shortly 2 years, but they didn't do anything radical back then. But I was wrong. These guys were serious. This time they were serious that they want to expand the welfare state drastically. We did not double, we did not triple, we quadrupled social welfare spending in Poland in last 6 or 7 years. This is unprecedented. We were a country where it didn't pay off to not to work. I mean, you could get some, crunches, some small money that you will maybe not buy, but
I want to ask, since you said they increased welfare spending so much, was it popular? Did it increase their popularity to be offering all this generous welfare spending?
they did a lot. Um, this is how they got even more popular, and they won with higher margin elections in 2019. But there are two important things I want to mention. I know I talk long, but I will try to pack it. One thing is that for a number of years, because it's already 6 or 7 years since they were elected first time, they truly managed to have this social welfare spending and um, basically increasing spending on many different reasons, and keep economic growth. I should even say that the economic growth was very high in the first years of this government, and they were attacking us. People, they call us neoliberals, which I don't like this word. Like, nobody even call themselves neo, but they say you neoliberals are wrong. You say that we should limit spending in order to grow. Look, we are spending like never, and we continue to grow. You were wrong, etc., etc. Unfortunately, now we see, after so many years, but we see that this policy was totally reckless. And this is not just welfare spending. This is also about rule of law. This government uh, does not obey the constitution as much as they should. Does not obey the independence of judiciary. We never had a great judiciary and fantastic constitution. That's not my point. But we had something. We had some division of, Montesquieu, division of powers. Not perfect, but still working somehow. And this government says we were elected by the people, and therefore we have a right to change every single institution in this country. So some of my friends, political experts, they call it in Polish language demokratura, and that will be something like dictatorship of democracy, where the voice of the people is so strong in the vision of these guys that no constitutional limits matter anymore.
I think we'd call that the tyranny of the majority or something along those lines. But
Your founding fathers very well knew how big danger it is. I wish
right,
politicians
right.
of Law and Justice, the ruling party of Poland, read a bit of founding fathers.
Our founding fathers knew you had to try to protect the rights of minorities in a majoritarian system and protect the rights to property and liberty. Uh, Layered on top of all this, of course, was the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the poor, millions of refugees coming into Poland. How has the country been able to deal with that influx of refugees and war on its border?
So at the beginning, I should say something maybe positive about the government. I said already a lot of bad things, but at least they remained quite sober about Russia. That differs us. That differs Polish government from Hungary's Viktor Orban government. That is in bed with Vladimir Putin and has a lot of shady deals with him. Poland doesn't go this way. We stand for Western Alliance, NATO, friendship with United States and also Western Europe. So that is positive. But we should know that this crisis was, we went through it. I'm very proud about Poles actually here, and I don't say this very often, but we really stand up to this challenge. Literally millions. I think at some point when it was the peak, maybe in April, about 3 million refugees from Ukraine were in Poland. They did not go to any refugee camps or any facilities built by governments. Similar, what I have in mind is what Germany and a few other countries built it back in 2015 for the Middle Eastern. We didn't do this. They found home under the roof of the Polish families. I had one family here as well in my house. They are family of my good friend. So it was a little bit different setup, but wonderful family from Lviv, from Western Ukraine. So the free society of Poland, the self managed society, responded very well to this crisis. We did this not thanks to government, but in spite of the government. I'm glad that the government at least did not mingle too much. And you should see all these fundraisers, all these people driving to the border with their private cars to help the refugees. It was just tremendous. This nation, Polish nation, has really this gene of solidarity. And this gene of solidarity is a very good thing, because solidarity comes from heart. It's a spontaneous, voluntary act of good will from one person towards the another in need.
That's a
Yes,
phrase worth pausing for me to repeat, that the Polish people have a gene of solidarity, because we know that word solidarity we associated very much with 1989 and the end of communism in Poland. I want to ask you one question I've had on my mind leading into this podcast is, what people of your parents' or grandparents' generation think about life in Poland versus life in communist Poland? Are there many people in Poland who long for the old days when things might have had been simpler in terms of that guaranteed job for life in the factory that produces something that nobody wants, limited choices that make life perhaps easier in some ways for some people, or is support for, at least staying free as a country, however defined, strong among the Polish people?
this mindset that we should be free and sovereign, is predominant. It's very very strong. So it's not so easy to find people who are nostalgic about the old regime for communism. Of course they do exist. They're usually quite old, um, and bitter because, well, they were younger and more successful under the previous regime. Usually they didn't, they were already, retired when this new system started, so they couldn't really take advantage of opportunities that it brought. These people exist, but they are a very small percentage. So in Ukraine, there are many more people like that, as far as I know, and in other post-Soviet countries. In Poland, it's small. However, there are rather two other groups that I can mention, big groups, because there are a lot of small groups as well. But one would be people who really took advantage of the transformation, who either started their own businesses and they flourished, and free market capitalism worked very well for them. Um, and these people usually are pro democratic, pro free markets, pro Western. And then you have this large group of people who are who come from the independent tradition, meaning they inherently dislike communism. They believe, and rightly so, they believe communism was slavery because the other country, namely USSR, dictated Poland what Poland should do. And for that very reason, they dislike or even hate communism because it was a type of slavery. But these people, but many of them in the second category, they don't enjoy or they have a hard time to enjoy the fruits of free market system that we have. Um, Maybe they were not enough lucky. Maybe they did not work hard. There are different stories, but you can find people who are nostalgic about economic system of communism, who would say like, "Oh, this was under Gierek in 70s. Oh, everybody had guaranteed job, vacation was paid by the state, etc., etc." But obviously, it was a slavery under Moscow, and we should be independent. They kind of blend the independent tradition with socialist tradition, and many of these people are the voting base for the Law and Justice Party. It may sound very weird for especially Americans that there are people who come from noble tradition, independent, kind of quite conservative, and they blend it with socialist mindset. It's especially for Americans, it's mind blowing. But here in Poland, you find this kind of mixture more and more often.
Well, Jacek, we're coming up on our time limit. I have a last question I want to ask you, which I ask many of our guests, and that is if you're in with at a TFAS program and a young person comes up to you today and says, Mr. Spendel, how do I make the world a better place? I want to make a difference in the world. I want to be a leader. I want to promote human flourishing. How do I do that? What kind of advice would you give a young person to help them prepare for leadership and courageous leadership?
Work hard, obviously. If you have opportunity to take a good internship, take it. It's not paid, not a problem. You don't need to make money in your early 20s. There will be time to make money in your life. Um, read good books, study hard, have your eyes open for opportunities. There are so many. I mean, when I was in my 20s, when I did all these TFAS programs, there were already many, but there are even more right now. Opportunities when it comes to growing your career, but follow a passion, have a passion in the first place. Passion it's just very good feeling to have a passion, because when you work hard towards realization of your passion, you don't even feel that you work. In some sense, of course, it's this feeling. Very very different to have a job that makes you driven every day versus the job that you look at the clock when the so passionate, hardworking, eyes open, ears open for opportunities. There's so many of them. Lots of networking. Go for programs like TIFAS, most definitely, or Project Arizona, or both. Actually, have both. But when you earn your success, it tastes better than when it's given to you by someone, and it's more long lasting.
I was talking to my colleagues at TFAS just a week ago, and I said, we've got a great team there, people who are passionate about our mission, have the opportunity to make a difference in the world. And there's a perk about working at TFAS on top of all that is we actually do pay you. But if you're passionate about it, that's what drives you. And those are the kind of people we look for in this business, as you know. Well, I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. There's a lot more it would be nice to talk with you about. I appreciate you joining me. We are so proud of all you're doing, not only in Poland, but with young people around the world who participate in Project Arizona and Liberty International. Your influence stretches way beyond the borders of Poland. So keep up the good work. I look forward to collaborating with you with TFAS and your initiatives. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Roger. Again, without TIFAS, I would not be where I am right now. And I still want to climb even higher. And always with liberty in my heart. TIFAS played a very, very important role. And TIFAS still does play a very important role for a lot of young people. Many of them I actually encourage to go to Prague, Santiago.
Yeah.
Where else? You have Asian program, obviously DC, because I believe that's the good place to go. And I want to thank once again your fabulous, generous donors who make all of this possible. You are doing fantastic work, and God bless TIFAS. I want to help as much as possible, and looking forward future collaboration.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I'll just mention one of the great things that was established by a number of donors was a scholarship we have for a Polish student each year to come to our program in Washington. It was the Ignacy Jan Paderewski Scholarship, but when General Ed Rowney died, the one who instigated that scholarship, we renamed it the Rowney Paderewski Scholarship, but that continues. It's endowed and brings Polish students to our program. And also I want to point out to you that both the permanent ambassador to the United Nations from Poland and his deputy are both TFAS alums. So when we're in New York, we have two of our distinguished Polish alums to call on.
Krzysztof Szczerski,
right?
UN.
Don't ask me for names right now, but...
And I remember that when he was running for Polish Parliament, in his very short note, in his leaflet, he mentioned that he's graduate of TFAS.
Yeah. Well, he recorded a wonderful message this summer that we played for our students in Prague, encouraging them to work hard and be leaders and echoing many of the things you said. So thank you very much. My guest today has been Jacek Spendel. This is the Liberty and Leadership Podcast. Thank you, Jacek.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you for listening to the Liberty and Leadership Podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, download, like, or share the show on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like this episode, I ask you to rate and review it. And if you have a comment or question for the show, please drop us an email at podcast@tfas.org. The Liberty and Leadership Podcast is produced at K Global Studios in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Roger Ream, and until next time, show courage in things large and small.